A recent over there update hit the largest number of top performing cards we've basically ever seen in Marvel Snap, sending the format into a little bit of a topsy turvy. You're going to note that this is the longest best decks video I've ever posted, and what you're about to hear is a lot of words. It's going to kind of tell you you can play most anything in this format, and the rest of this video is going to run you through exactly what that most everything encompasses with a whopping 13 different deck lists. While there's a handful of deck lists that we're going to start with here that are the most popular based on the Untapped.gg infinite metrics so far, none of the most popular decks that I'm covering have the strongest performing metrics. We'll get to those immediately following, and the decks that do have the strongest performing metrics really aren't head and shoulders far away from anything else. This is very much a developing metagame situation, and we're probably going to be rehashing another one of these videos in about a week or so once things get to settle a little bit, if they can settle with a patch and a new card release just around the corner. All that being said, let's get to it, shall we? The singular most popular archetype on the Marvel Snap Infinite ladder per the Untapped.gg metrics right now is just Classic Destroy. This archetype was competitive and popular before the OTA changes happened, and it wasn't playing Elsa, Angela, or any of the other cards that got adjusted, and Marvel Snap's latest release, Nico Minaru, slots really eloquently into it. This particular list that I have on the screen right now is one of the higher performing and the most popular Destroy lists. Noteworthy that Nico has slotted into this deck where we would typically see something like Taskmaster or Arnim Zola as a way to double up your Null or a big Venom at the end of the game. I would be surprised if this is necessarily optimal, but things need to be worked out whenever a new card gets introduced to an existing archetype like this. I think this is definitely a great starting point if you're looking to jump in and blow things up right now in Marvel Snap. The second most popular deck, trailing behind Destroy by a small margin, is the Thanos Prison variation, still leveraging Elsa despite her downgrade in the recent OTA. The true strength of this deck definitely comes from the fact that Psylocke as well as the Time Stone allow you to play Professor X as early as turn 4, locking down a path before your opponent has a chance to fully play to the board. We then follow up that first prison element with things that can move around the board like Jeff and Vision in tandem with Alioth to lock the opponent out in a game in a very deterministic manner. This deck list is also choosing to leverage Marvel Snap's latest release, Nico Minaru, although it's worth noting she's definitely not a requirement to make this deck work, even if she does have good, strong synergy with the Infinity Stones that Thanos provides. Our third most popular deck list is another Thanos list, but it tends to play out a good bit differently from the Prison list since it's not playing cards like Jeff, Vision, or even Alioth. This deck list is looking to leverage Spectrum along with a plethora of ongoing cards to power up your board in tandem with things like Blue Marvel and Kazar. While the sample list that I have on your screen here includes Series 5 cards Jean Grey and Iron Lad, I think you can substitute those two for other ongoing effects like Mr. Fantastic and the Claw and still play this deck to great effect on a little bit more of a budget. Our last deck in the popular category is just a classic discard list that is likely popular right now because Hellcow was buffed in the most recent OTA, and this feels like the most natural place to include it. Now, Hellcow's big stat, along with discarding mass cards, can allow us to bin things like Apocalypse and Swarm and Mobius and even Dakin's Shard to double up his power. The core strength of what this archetype brings to the table, for those not familiar, that it's very consistent at what it does game to game, while its weakness is that going into the final turn, it tends to be very face up on the table as to what exactly it can do. Your opponent gets to see when you discard things like Swarm or your Apocalypse gets bigger, so more skilled players are going to be able to calculate your output range and only stay when they're going to beat you while leaving when you have them beat. That being said, I think the raw power that this deck outputs is still very reasonable, and it has the stats in addition to its play rate to back up it being a fantastic choice in the current developing metagame. As we move on from the most popular to the top performing category, I want to make it abundantly clear that this is very much a snapshot of a developing metagame. All of the deck lists that we're going to be looking at are single digit percentages, and the most popular variations of them only have games played in the hundreds as I'm recording this video. That being said, I think all of these deck lists have sound core ideas and are decks that if you pilot them well, you could find success with as the metagame is churning, looking for a best deck to inevitably come out on top. At the top of the top performing list is a deck list that I called out before the OTAs as being the best non-Elsa deck in my opinion, and that is the Zabu Darkhawk deck list. I think this deck is actually even better than it was before the changes happened now, because Darkhawk's ability to be large based on your opponent's deck size makes it a natural predator into the Thanos decks that are incredibly popular right now. Man-Thing has also come into his own right as being a metagame powerhouse, with the more popular Thanos decks often eschewing to play Luke Cage, meaning Man-Thing can come down in one of their lanes with all their stones and often be double digits worth of stats for 4 energy as well. This deck list also gets to play a plethora of powerful tech cards. Shadow King, Rogue, Shang-Chi, and Luke Cage ensure that you're going to be very disruptive to whatever your opponent is doing, regardless of what their strategy looks like. And when we mix in stuff like Korg, Rockslide, and Black Widow, that not only serve to make Darkhawk bigger, but also disrupt the quality of the cards your opponent is drawing, you get a really potent cocktail of a fantastic deck. Our next deck list here is a testament to the fact that every single one of the cards that got nerfed in the over-the-air update this week definitely deserve the adjustments that they've got. Loki, featuring Angela and Elsa, is still just putting up pretty strong metrics in this developing format. These cards were very pushed before, so even once they get dialed back in a little bit, they are still strong contenders in the format. Something that's exceptionally noteworthy here is that you'll note that my sample deck list does not include Nico Minoru. While the sample sizes I'm looking at initially here are on the smaller side, a trend that I noticed is that all of the Loki decks, including Nico, were struggling in terms of performance a lot compared to this deck list that is essentially card for card what was being played before the over-the-air update happened. While the core of these Loki deck lists remain similar, the tech cards, Mobius, and Luke Cage specifically, get swapped out for things like Cosmo or others, depending on what the person piloting the deck wants to tech against. So those are definitely the most customizable slots if you're looking to play this. For our next top performing deck list, honestly, I almost want to skip this one, but for the sake of due diligence, I feel like I'm obligated to tell you that Galactus has good metrics on Untapped right now in this developing metagame. This prison variation, Electro Wave into Professor X and Alioth as a backup plan to the Galactus game plan is performing very well. This is honestly a testament to something that the second dinner team has pointed out many times, which is the impact of most nerfs is largely psychological, and when cards get adjusted, players stop playing them frequently, even if they can still keep up. This is a deck list we see people coming back around to since we recently dealt psychological damage to Elsa and others, and players are realizing that, hey, this is probably still pretty good. Our next deck list is a tried and true classic that's consistently been putting up numbers again in a post Mobius and Elsa world, and that is Sarah Control. Again, despite the downgrades to Angela and Elsa, Sarah Control is still playing both of these cards and putting up good numbers. If you're not familiar with this deck list, it looks to put stats into play with Angela, Elsa, Bishop, and Hitmonkey, and then it looks to disrupt its opponent with tech cards like Mobius, Luke Cage, Shadow King, and Shang-Chi, all made possible by the deck's namesake, Sarah, letting you play a big flurry of these cards in a way that's difficult for your opponent to predict on the final turn of the game. This big flourish on turn 6 also contributes to what this deck has in terms of average cube rate being high, because lots of players will be staying in games that they should otherwise be leaving, letting them get completely blown out for 4 and 8 cubes quite frequently. To the surprise of no one, a reduction in power to both Sauron and Shuri has not impacted the strong performance that this classic archetype has been putting up since these two cards were introduced to the game. Shuri into Red Skull, into Taskmaster gets you lots of stats on the board, often protected by a copy of armor in a way that's difficult for your opponent to interact with. And I would argue that with the rise of Thanos and the recent buff to Spectrum, the fact that this deck gets to play Enchantress as a way to mitigate the downsides on Typhoid Mary and Red Skull also makes it better positioned than it has been recently, because Enchantress is also a very potent tech card into these opposing decks full of ongoing cards. All the folks bemoaning that Angela and Elsa were gutted in the most recent over the air will continue to be shown that they were wrong, as we have another deck list from before the OTAs happened that's still just being played and putting up strong metrics. It's really quite the testament to how deserved all these changes were, that these decks, after having numbers shaved off of them, are still putting up competitive numbers in the game. This Mover Elsa's variation, pairing Elsa and Angela along with Craven, has 3 powerful 2 energy plays that scale up as cards like Nightcrawler, Jeff, Silk, Spider-Man, and Vision move about the board. And then the strong finish that this deck has, having either Alioth or Doctor Doom in tandem with your cards that can move anywhere and everywhere on the 6th turn, makes it very difficult for your opponent to ever be better than a coin flip when they're trying to play into you. Our final deck list in the top performing category is Hela Living Tribunal. This deck list is looking to execute one of 2 relatively straightforward combos. The first is you play Invisible Woman, you put MODOK behind Invisible Woman, you put Hela behind Invisible Woman, and then at the end of the game, MODOK discards your hand, Hela puts them all back into play, and your opponent gets overwhelmed by the stats that they produce. The other combo is utilizing Iron Man, followed by Onslaught, followed by Living Tribunal, to have 16 points worth of stats that gets multiplied by 4 and divided by 3 across the board in a way that's going to be difficult for your opponent to keep up with. This deck list is one that tends to have fairly high cube equity because people often refuse to retreat in games where they're going to be deterministically beat by either your Living Tribunal plonking down or your Hela flipping up at the end of the game. And thanks to tools like Magic, Crystal, Jubilee, and Iron Lad, this deck list consistently gets to see its entirety in most games to make sure that these combos happen again and again and again. Oh, good. You're still here. I know we've covered a lot with 11 different meta decks all vying to come out on top in this developing metagame, but one of my videos like this wouldn't be complete without a couple of my own personal pocket picks that I think are fun and pretty off meta to let you be competitive and catch people off guard. The first of these is my favorite Nico Minaru deck I've been playing recently, and that is this kind of Nico Good Stuff Zero deck that we have up here on the screen. The basic idea is that we have cards like Hood and Black Widow and Mirage that sacrifice to Nico to draw cards or turn into demons, and then we have other disruptive tools such as Luke Cage, Armor, Shang-Chi, and Enchantress to disrupt what our opponent has going on, while the small zero package that this deck provides with Lizard and Typhoid Mary give us some valuable stats to actually win lanes that our tech cards can't pick up. The overlapping synergy here is that both of our cards that we're looking to zero out periodically also get mitigated by Luke Cage's ongoing effect, so the deck has a lot of nice little overlapping synergies while also having an individually high card quality. Finally, I wanted to shout out the big Spectrum deck again. That was yesterday's deck highlight. If you missed that, be sure to check it out after this video. We threw this together, modeling it after the old Spectrum Destroyer decks from months past after Spectrum's OTA buff, and I rattled off an 8-1 record with it in the session after we brewed it up. This deck list gets to do the kind of cheesy Professor X thing on occasion, with Electro letting you slam him on turn 4, while also having just powerful disruptive ongoing cards that we can buff up with Spectrum, while also slamming down Marvel format staple Orca to win lanes entirely on his own or when assisted by something like the Claw. All the data I referenced in this video is coming from Untapped.gg's post-infinite stats with players collection level 3000 plus. At the time of recording, when I was referencing the data to build out the deck list I wanted to highlight in this video, there were just under 90,000 games played in that post-infinite ladder, with lots of players trying lots of different things. I have to imagine some of these deck lists that I list as top performing are going to be even stronger than when I highlighted them today, and a number of them are going to fall off as things get optimized and counterplay gets developed to them. I'll really be curious to see if Thanos can maintain its top spot as the most popular deck, because the early metrics are indicating these other lesser played decks are having stronger performances than it, while Thanos is still a lot more popular. I would love to know in the comments down below what you're seeing success with, and I look forward to revisiting this topic in the week to come once the format has had more time to shape up and mature. As always, if you enjoyed my detailed breakdown here, be sure to snap that like button to help this video reach some more people, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You watched the video all the way through, so you probably liked at least some of what you had to hear, and we'd love to see you back again sometime. Thanks for watching, folks. Peace.